The last video we had on Fabiano Caruana, I asked, can anybody stop this man? Well, that escalated quickly. It didn't take long. But Fabiano Caruana, he lost in the 4th round of the US Chess Championship. And, well, his opponent played well, but Fabiano, he overpressed in a way. He could have made an easy draw, but in time trouble he messed up and he lost. Okay, he's only half a point behind and the tournament is still open, but this loses some of the mystique of the last few weeks where Fabiano has been on an absolute tear. But let's see this game. Fabiano had the white pieces and he opened up with e4. We had the Italian game, bishop to c4, and the usual quiet, you know, gioco pianissimo, where yeah, we tend to have a maneuvering game. h6, rook e1, castles, h3, and here black can play a6 and a5. I think what Izoria did in this game looked quite interesting. He played a5, knight b to d2, stock standard moves, a4 now. Interesting idea. It's debatable if this can become a weakness or if this is a strength. If we have a quick look at white attacking this pawn immediately, there's a pretty cunning trap here. Bishop b5, bishop to d7. And if you take this pawn, can you find the move for black now? Yes, rook takes a4. Queen takes a4 and knight into b4. And this pawn will drop. The queen to d1. Knight takes d3. We see black having pretty good compensation for the exchange. Instead, Fabiano didn't want any of this funky business, and he played knight to f1, just getting on with the usual maneuver. I've talked about this before. This is almost automatic. But a4 also, it is blocking this square, so you know this could be an idea in some cases. But for now, bishop to d7, and maybe now knight to a5 has become a positional threat to capture this bishop. So white played d4. Okay, opening up new squares for this bishop if we are attacked, and also hitting this one. So this one retreats to b6. Fabiano gets on with the usual knight maneuver, knight to g3, and now the bishop pulls back to f1. Here another interesting move by Izoria. He plays queen to b8. Very unusual idea. It looks like he's flirting with, in some lines, to put the queen on a7 and increase the pressure on this diagonal. However, this doesn't come to fruition in this game, but perhaps the idea is to put the pressure on d4 so that white has to go d5 at some point, which it did. So probably this is what Izoria wanted, white to open up this diagonal. Now this bishop is outside the pawn chain here, and it's a pretty good bishop, so white at some point probably has to exchange it, and black figures he has a pretty nice position. Okay, knight to h4 was played. It's fairly standard in these lines to try and get knight to f5. And now king h7. See some maneuvering here, queen f3 and queen d8. So black probably figures that, okay, we don't need any pressure on d4, so the queen returns. The position has a more closed state now, so you can afford some maneuvering and to take your time. Bishop to d2 and knight e to g8. This looks passive, but it's covering the h6 pawn, which becomes important once a white knight lands on f5. We can now play g6, kick the knight, and this pawn is not attacked. Knight to e3, king to g7, knight to c4. We have to keep this bishop, so bishop a7. And now Caruana initiates a trade with bishop to e3. Izoria accepts, and now knight to h7. A lot of maneuvering, with the knights especially in this game. Now Caruana decides to open up the game with f4. We see b5 by Izoria kicking the knight, and now he takes f4. So white is trying to get some kind of an attack on the king side, but however black has this really nice e5 square under control. Now I've played structures in the check penalty where you have a similar situation and you'd love to get this e5 square. So black's dream is to get a knight on this square. That would be the dream. But it's hard to organize that at the moment. The knights are not ready to jump in here. So Fabiano is hoping to make something happen on the king side before black can find a way to get the knight to e5. Queen f6. Fabiano doesn't want to trade because, well, he has given up some structural advantage to black, so he's trying to attack. So keep the queens on, keep the dynamics. But now he plays queen f3. Okay, if black takes now, we take with the pawn, and then we can play f4, and this square is no longer a problem. Rook a b8, a3. It doesn't want to allow c4. At b4, and now black plays c5, and Fabiano decides not to take. If he takes on c6, knight takes c6, and now we land this knight on e5, which fully compensates for this backward pawn, and black will have a fine position. Fabiano didn't want any of this, played rook a to d1, and now some more knight maneuvers by black, knight to c8, queen e3, and knight b6. So this knight is sort of waiting for an opportunity to get the d7 square, but it's hard to do because this is under attack. So how do you move the bishop to get the e5 square? Knight to f3, knight g5. And it seems like Fabiano isn't finding any particular plan to give black problems here. So we see a lot of back and forth here. Bishop e2, queen g5. And here we actually have a twofold repetition, queen f6, queen e3, and queen g5 again. But then Fabiano decides to play on with queen to f3 and queen f6. So now he can't play queen e3 because queen g5 would be threefold repetition. So he plays another move, bishop to d3. And now finally Izoria decides to take on f3. And he can do so because white can't take with a pawn. He would not take if white could take with a pawn. If it does now, this pawn would hang, so white has to take with a knight. So Izoria is probably happy. He still has this opportunity of getting this e5 square, but at this moment white is threatening maybe to push e5 at some point, and then you don't have this blockade. So f6 to keep the blockade of the e5 square. h4. And now what does black do? I think this is a very important positional move. What was the idea of white moving h4? Yes, he wants to push h5. Get rid of this pawn, and what happens if we get rid of it? We get access to the f5 square at some point, because we can put another knight here. So, black plays h5, of course. Now f5 square for white, king f2. Getting ready for the ensuing endgame at some point. Knight to f8, knight d2, and now a pretty cool maneuver by black. We talked about that we want to get a knight to the e5 square. Now look at what this knight does. How do you get this knight to the e5 square? It's sort of like a puzzle. It's like a puzzle. How about this? That's a lot of arrows, but you get to e5. Let's see. That's his plan. Knight c8, rook b1, knight e7, knight g to f1, knight to g8, knight to e3, and knight to h6. Another idea. Okay, so now he's ready to get to e5 if he wants, but he can also push f5 at some stage, and he decides to go for that instead. After bishop e2, he plays f5. But now Fabiano starts to try something on the queen side. Plays b3, takes, rook takes, and black plays c4. Maybe f4 is a possibility as well. You get the pawn to f4 and then maybe try to maneuver something to e5. It seems like a viable option. But he plays c4, rook b4, and now black takes on e4. So at the moment, black has a pawn up. But there are going to be a lot of weak pawns. Let's see, rook e to b1, rook a8, and a4. Okay, rook takes and pawn takes. So black is temporarily 2 pawns up, but as you can see, I can choose what he takes here, and he decides to take on c4. Another weakness here, and these are still weak. Probably at this point white has a tiny edge, but probably not enough to win. Knight comes to f7 to guard the pawn. Rook b7, king to f6, bishop to d1. He tries to protect the a pawn, but knight b6. And Fabi's trying to make something happen here, but again, Izoria is defending very well. Knight to d2, bishop to d3, king to e3. So there's a long game. Knight to e5, and here Fabiano regains his pawn. But now black goes for activity on the king side, g5. He's at some stage eyeing this pawn, and then this passer can become dangerous. But it comes at the price, because Fabiano now gets the pawn on e4, so black is down a pawn. But on the other hand, this should be a draw. There's nothing really that either side can do. Rook to c8. And here, yeah, they mentioned this as some moment where Fabiano perhaps didn't readjust correctly, but still it's an equal game. Fabiano played bishop c6, takes, and now king to d4. But now he's starting to risk things, because now the knight enters, and after c4, knight takes g2, king d5. Now Fabiano needs to be careful. I think at this point he can fairly easily make a draw by taking on d6. Rook takes on c4, and then knight e5. The point is that whenever black pushes this pawn, you just play knight to f3, check, take the pawn, and the rook and knight against rook is fairly easily drawn. Seems like, however, he was still trying to win. And he played knight b6. And the idea here is to, I guess, try to use the c pawn and queen that. But Izoria plays knight e3. King e6 is still okay. But now comes a blunder. Yeah, rook c6. Had to pause the video there. So where were we? Yeah, here looks like perhaps the final blunder. King to d7. And looks like Fabiano might have missed knight takes c4 here. The rook is attacked, but black can play this, and this is just, yeah, it's if you take the rook, knight a5 check, and this is just game over. Let's see the remaining moves. King takes d6, knight takes b7 check, and this pawn is simply too strong. Now king to f4, and you're not going to be able to bring this knight in time to challenge this pawn. Knight to c4 was played, but it doesn't matter. h4, knight d2. Okay, trying to get here to block, but that's not enough, because this king is coming. First, Izoria maneuvers his knight very nicely to g4, from where it dominates this knight, takes away some squares, and now to king f3. This king is simply coming to attack the knight, and from there, or to go to g2, and then we just queen the pawn. Game over. So yeah, a somewhat shocking loss, given the recent form of Caruana and Izoria being one of the lower rated guys in the tournament. And well, they claimed in the broadcast that such a loss would be unlikely to happen to Fabiano against Carlsen or players of super elite level, because he wouldn't have tried to play on and try to win there. But you know, that's the price you have to pay if you're stubborn and you try to overpress. Sometimes it can backfire, and it did in this case. So yeah, Fabiano finally loses, and loses the lead as well, but he's still in contention. A lot of rounds left to play, and yeah, a nice twist in this tournament, and I hope they keep on coming, and I think we will see an exciting tournament. See you in the next video.